So today we talked about brain mechanisms of sleep and the idea that there's basically these centers in the brainstem here that have these little neurons that do the coolest things. They snake all the way up through your entire brain and they administer serotonin and norepinephrine and acetylcholine, which are all involved in the sleep-wake cycle. There are certain areas in the brainstem that actually are like sleep centers that control that you feel sleepy and need to go to sleep. And then there are other areas in the brainstem that control arousal or waking up. And they seem to be kind of doing this constant interplay between each other where they're kind of listening to the body and their circadian rhythms and what's happening there. And then when it's time to sleep, they're inhibiting the ones that say wake up. And then that goes on for a while until you're at a homeostasis tipping point where you need to then go back to sleep or wake up, and then one will inhibit the other, and so you have these circadian rhythms. What do you do in terms of, we know that these neurotransmitters are involved in sleep, so there's lots of drugs that you can kind of use to modulate sleep cycles or wakefulness, and the most common one that we think of is caffeine. You know, caffeine works really well as an awake signal, but how exactly is it working? You have this thing called cyclic AMP in your cells that is an energy source. And as your cells go through the day in the brain, they use up the cyclic AMP, and as a byproduct, they make this thing called adenosine. And adenosine then gets built up in the extracellular space in between the neurons. And the adenosine then is a signal when it gets high that you need to go to sleep and you need to kind of rest, relax, and kind of repair. And that is exactly how it's working. It is actually an antagonist, so it is working against adenosine. It actually binds to adenosine receptors so that adenosine can't, and in that way, it makes you be able to stay awake longer. And sleep seems really important for the consolidation of memories. So going from short term in the hippocampus to actually being in the cortex in terms of like a long-term memory storage. And they figured this out because they were actually able to look at specific cells that were activated when rats were learning mazes. And they had the rats go to sleep at night, still attached to their recording devices. And what they figured out is that in the dreams, the same cells were activated called place cells that told them kind of where they were in the maze. And they were in the same pattern as if they were doing the maze. And so the researchers realized that if they woke up the animals every time they did this rehearsal in the sleep, that they actually, the next morning when they went in the maze, they couldn't remember the maze. So if you prevent them from having the memories that they're working through in their sleep, then when they awake, they haven't consolidated them into long-term memory. And I mean, they've done the same things in humans. So they've gone into kindergarten classrooms and they've taught them a really simple task using like a declarative memory task where they have to remember a list of words or something like that. And what they do then is give some of the kids naps. And then there's another group that don't have naps during the day. And they found that the kids that had the half-hour naps were able to actually do better than the ones that had no naps at all. They could remember more, which is amazing, especially considering that nobody really does naps in preschool anymore. So preschoolers aged 3 to 5 should be getting 10 to 13 hours of sleep every night. And this includes nap time hours as well. And it's really important for learning what we do every day, which I thought was really cool as well. Join us every day in May for a new video.